All right, greetings. Welcome back to Blackbird News, where everything is connected. How y'all feeling? What's going on? Good to see you. How are you? Starting off the show with a tip on Rockfin. Thank you. Urban Hermit says thank you for your work. Thanks, Urban Hermit. I appreciate it. Word up. Max Sarjay says I have a Facebook page, so that means I'm somebody. Certainly does. What up? We're live on Callin, Rockfin, YouTube. Let's get into it. There's lots to talk about. As always. And well, we'll start with the old overshoot. The overshoot issue. Which is, I think it's one of the main issues. A lot of people would say it's the issue. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of us. We can't seem to do the right thing. So there's just a lot of us not doing the right thing. So that's what it is. I don't know what the correct number of humans are supposed to be on the planet. I'm not even going to really jump into that one. But people have ideas about that. But overshoot is certainly a problem. Especially when you can't manage your affairs very well. Coffee. All right. Anyways, Mark Bevis says climate is not the issue, overshoot is. Carbon emissions are a byproduct of overshoot. Dealing with overshoot would automatically deal with carbon emissions. It's pretty solid. Pretty solid assessment. How much do we need to cut back? This is from this year. Today, July 28th, 2022, is Earth Overshoot Day, the day on which the Earth can no longer cope with human exploitation and waste. It comes around every year, although depressingly, it normally comes 1 or 2 days earlier each year. This year, it is 1 day earlier than it was last year. Overshoot Day is an important marker as it provides us with a very good indicator as to how quickly we are degrading the planet upon which we rely for our nourishment, shelter, clean water, and fresh air. Closely associated with the Overshoot Day is the calculation of how many Earth-like planets we would need to be able to continue to support our lifestyles indefinitely. At the present, on a global average, we would need 1.7 Earths. Globally. Regionally, that's a little bit different. Also a little different, you know what I'm saying? That's better. Remember, though, this figure of 1.7 is the average for the entire planet. The rich nations require a lot more than 1.7 Earth-like planets. How many? Well, the computations have been done. What those computations show is bleak. The USA, Canada, and UAE would require 5.1 Earth-like planets. Australia would require 4.5. Russia 3.4. New Zealand 3.3. Japan 2.9, etc., etc. The European nations require between 2.6 and 4 Earth-like planets each. What about China? I hear some ask. Well, yes, Overshoot Day. The Overshoot Day and number of planets required by China has been calculated. China would require 2.4 Earth-like planets. What about the rest of the world? Most of the African nations and much of Asia, including India and Latin America, require 1 or less Earth-like planets. We can now ask ourselves, how much do we need to cut back in order to bring our lifestyles back to a sustainable level where we require just 1 Earth-like planet? If you live in one of the rich nations, the answer to that question is a lot. Well, I can actually answer that question even better. if India and other Asian and African nations are under the one Earth-like planet threshold, then you would have to revert back or reduce your lifestyle down to what an average or even less than average Indian person or African person would consume. That's real. That's just real. And there's lots of other things going on in there, but unfortunately, again, we can't really manage ourselves with the technology and stuff. It would be really nice if we lived in a relatively low consumption world, not too many people needing things, right? Because everything is a problem of scale. So if 8 billion people even need just the main stuff like food and water, well, you're still stressing the system. So you need kind of less people to not stress the system as much. But let's say we managed ourselves well and we could have low consumption lifestyles with some technology. Maybe, and everybody shared all the food of the planet, right? No, everybody had medical care. Nobody was, right? We didn't live basically in a capitalist society. Maybe. But I don't, again, we can't manage ourselves. So if we can't manage ourselves, I guess the other option would be that everybody lives at a poverty level, which sounds wild, I know, but it's true. It's actually true. What we deem to be a poverty level. And then maybe it's a big mess that we've gotten ourselves into. And it's okay to have conversations around it. It's not crazy. You're not a crazy person. You're not a Malthusian eugenicist lunatic for having such conversations. That is not, a crazy conversation. Could be because it's real. It's physics and math. And if you want to ignore physics and math, do so at your own peril, which we are doing right now. We're doing so at our own peril, and our peril will be the fruits of our ignorance. Ignore ignorance. USA, Canada, and UAE would have to reduce by 80%, more than 80%. Australia by almost 80%. Russia and New Zealand by around 70%. The European nations by 60 to 75%. Japan by 65%. China and South Africa by 58%. And Brazil by 37%. These numbers are extremely important. There is so much hype and focus on climate change and carbon emissions that the importance of overshoot often gets ignored, misunderstood, or lost in debates. Climate is not the issue. Overshoot is. Carbon emissions are a byproduct of overshoot. Or overshoot is a byproduct of carbon emissions. You could actually reverse that equation very nicely. We are only here because we are burning up the fossil fuels. So they go hand in hand. You could just look at a graph of the last 150 years and, again, ignore the graph, the very obvious graph at your own peril. Dealing with overshoot would automatically deal with carbon emissions. Replacing and substituting will not work. When one truly considers and understands the implications of how much we must reduce our consumption of waste, it becomes obvious that trying to do so by replacing or substituting with alternatives does not work. We must reduce by up to 80% our use and production of transport. Replacing cars with electric or hydrogen vehicles will not work. We have to walk, cycle, or take public transport. We have to stop flying. We still need food, but we need to reduce our meat consumption by at least 80%. Furthermore, we must dramatically reduce our reliance on food that is produced overseas and out of season, and food that is produced by monocultural agricultural transnationals. Solid advice. I like that. We must cut back on our use of technology and our desire for ever more of the latest whiz-bang techno invention. For example, replacing a mobile phone every 3 years does not work. We must reduce our electricity demand significantly. Switching the production of electricity from fossil fuels to alternatives will not work. We must reduce our waste. Throwing away food, tins, paper, cardboard, plastic, and other items does not work. Especially, we must curtail, not simply reduce, our production of toxic waste. In each and every one of these cases above, we in the rich nations must cut back by at least 60%, and in many cases, up to 80%. Can we do that? Can we afford not to? Will we do that? That's good. Short, to the point. Oh, we got a caller. Stu, how do you do? Hello, Stu. I think you have to unmute yourself if you're trying to call in. No? Hello, Stu. All right. Well, maybe that was maybe that was an unintentional call in. All right. We'll keep going. Well, that was good. Excellent. Solid. I enjoyed it. Robert F. Kennedy posts this, and we may not have to do. I mean, that's the whole point. The reality of that situation that I just described in that article is that we can do it ourselves. We can do it in a conscious, managed, aware, communal kind of way, or we can let nature just do it for us. We can let nature do it for us, which is nature will, if we toxify the planet, then the planet will no longer be able to support us. And that will manifest itself in all kinds of ways. One of the ways it's manifesting itself is lower birth rates due to pollution, right? Microplastics, endocrine disruptors, glyphosate, all kinds of things are ruining our ability to have children. And so the earth or nature or biology is just taking care of the problem for us because we can't manage ourselves. Nature will just manage it for us. The authors of a new analysis found that sperm count globally dropped by more than half between 1973 and 2018, and that decline is accelerating faster than expected. Faster than expected. North says less people right now is good for people. Yeah. And absolutely nobody is saying, well, we got to get rid of these people over here right away. No, nobody's saying that. What people are saying is, let's have a conversation about it. Maybe there are sensible, logical, common sense ways to attack this problem. All right, let's keep going. The author, so sperm count is declining. Sperm counts plummet dramatically faster than previously thought. Where have you heard that phrase before? Faster than expected, sooner than expected, worse than expected. For years, scientists across the world have gathered evidence showing declines in sperm quality. Now, new research compiling the results of those studies has found that sperm count has dropped dramatically around the world, and the rate of decline is accelerating. In a new analysis, researchers at Mount Sinai Medical Center, the University of Copenhagen, and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, among others, found that sperm count globally dropped by more than half between 1973 and 2018, and that the decline is accelerating. Since 1972, sperm count has dropped by about 1% each year. Since 2000, the annual decrease has been, on average, more than 2.6%. It's quite a bump. The findings raise concern that an increasing number of people will need assistance to reproduce, as well as concerns about the overall health of human society, since low sperm count is linked to higher rates of some diseases. Oh ho. While scientists are still trying to tease out the reasons for the drop, chemical exposures, especially to pesticides, are a likely factor. And climate change may even play a role. May even. Of course it does. When the entire planet is a little warmer, when everything is a little bit warmer and the seasons and the weather are changing and out of whack, well, doesn't that affect insects? Doesn't that affect birds? Doesn't that affect plants? Doesn't that affect wild animals? Well, why wouldn't it affect humans? It's going to affect your physiology, right? It's going to affect your biology and everything that's going on as well. Why? Because we're just animals. Sorry to break it to you. We live in the same biosphere that everyone else does. We live by the same rules in the biosphere that everyone else does. There are no different rules for us just because we're smarter or more clever. And if you don't play by the rules, then you get the consequences. We have clear evidence that there is a crisis in male reproduction. Haggai Levine, lead author on the study and an epidemiologist at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, told EHN. The study builds on the team's previous research, which showed a decline in sperm count in North America, Europe, Australia, and parts of Asia of 28.5% between 1973 and 2011. Adding data from 38 studies to new analysis has made the case for sperm decline stronger. It's really alarming, said Shanna Swan, an author of the paper and leading reproductive epidemiologist at Mount Sinai, who is also an adjunct scientist with Environmental Health Sciences, which publishes ehn.org. Swan authored the book Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, altering male and female reproductive development and imperiling the future of the human race. The research found that the average global sperm count in 2018 was 49 million per milliliter of semen. When a man's sperm count drops below 45 million per milliliter, his ability to cause a pregnancy starts dropping dramatically, said Swan. She said the results could mean that in coming decades, large swaths of the global population of men could be subfertile or infertile, or could require assisted reproduction techniques like in vitro fertilization or IVF, etc., etc. Overall, said Levine, the results indicated that something is very wrong with our global modern environment. You don't say. Well, there you go. So, this is... Ooh, bam, boom, bip. I was right on the money. Though the reasons for the drop were not discussed in the paper, scientists have known for decades that certain environmental factors like exposures to pesticides and other endocrine-disrupting chemicals like phthalates and polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, there's also that, plastic chemicals and plastics, can have impacts on reproductive health. Nearly 20 years ago, for example, Swan and other researchers published an analysis of research into links between pesticide exposure and sperm quality and found that 79% of studies indicated a decrease in sperm quality among those exposed to the chemicals. Diet, activity level, and stress may also play a role. I mean, so we can either, again, have conversation about what is causing these problems, which is systemic, right? It's the entire system that we have built up now, that we are trying to get the entire planet to live inside of this system, modern industrial civilization, that has caused these problems. So we can have like adult grown-up conversations about what to do about these problems, or we can ignore it, or we could say it's they're trying to make it our fault, or it's, we could cast blame on others. We could expect the powerful to change their evil ways. All kinds of silly ideas that are being put out there as a response to the reality of a new world that we live in, that we've created. Yeah, good stuff from Environmental Health Defense. Here's Elliot Jacobson saying, just commenting on COP27. The outcome of COP27 was widely judged a failure after oil-producing countries and high emitters weakened and removed key commitments to greenhouse gases and phasing out fossil fuels. So, and that's real. Nobody's going to commit to less carbon emissions when our entire civilization is built on carbon emissions. If we take away the carbon emissions, you are going to take away a large chunk of industrial civilization. That's just physics and math. It's about as simply put as I can put it, or anybody else. So they're not going to commit to actually doing it. They know they can't commit to doing this. They know they can't stop this. So they're not really having adult conversations around this. And unfortunately, a lot of other people are not allowing people to have adult conversations around this, right? Climate change isn't a thing. They're doing it to you. Dr. Evil in the mountain somewhere is controlling the HARP guy and the chemtrails. And if only we would stop the chemtrails and the secret military stuff, like they're going to just do that on their own. If only we could just, if the rich people could stop being rich, blah, 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 right? There's all these reasons why this is not your and my, our problem together. And there's all these reasons why, people aren't really allowing anyone to have adult conversations around this. All right, we got a call from John. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you to unpack that a little bit. What do you mean when you say that they're not allowing you to have the conversation?
Well, it's for one thing, climate change is I've been talking about how overshoot just in this show alone is a big part of the problem. Our entire civilization is built on the thing which is polluting the earth, right? And so they're not they're talking about transitioning to another economy. If we need more clean energy and everything will be fine. Everybody just buys electric cars. It's right. They're just picking around the edges of the problem, and they're not really. And on top, that's the governments at large, and the corporations and the governments together are deciding like, well, we're going to give people these half truths about what really needs to happen, around climate change. And
so they're prescribing. So these are the governments that are liberal. They believe that climate change is a real issue, but the solutions that they're prescribing are like buy electric cars, put up more windmills.
Right. Or let's have some lab grown meat, stuff like that. Right.
Do you feel, yeah. And so do you feel that they're not letting you talk about other solutions? Like, are you talking about censorship here or just?
No, actually not censorship. Like, kind of there's it's propaganda mostly.
Okay.
Right. It's very well known that neocon and oil companies have neocons, capitalists in general have funded think tanks that have put out like climate denialism messages out there, right? to make people not aware, they don't want people to be aware of the problem. They don't want people to understand what's going on, right? So that they can continue and go about their merry way and make profits. And so it's, there's several forms of manipulation, which is one is ignoring the problem. Another is creating false narratives around the problem. And there's so many like journalists and people out there, it's very popular and conservative. Anybody who's conservative or anybody who's a truther or a conspiracy theorist or anybody, it's all they're doing is climate change to us. It's not a real thing. It's not really happening. This isn't, and they're just actually repeating this propaganda that has been put out there for like years and years and years. Unfortunately, that's what's happening. You're not allowed to talk. You're also there's another very important part of propaganda, and that's about overpopulation. You cannot talk about overpopulation. You cannot do it. On the left, you're racist. On the right, you're a nutbag. You're a eugenicist. Right. So, on the right, you're a Nazi sympathizer. You're a Klaus Schwab Nazi sympathizer. On the left, you're racist. You just can't have the conversation about it, and it's really.
I just want to be clear.
It's unfortunate.
I think what you're. Can you still hear me?
Yes. I totally can.
My speech bubble isn't showing, so I wasn't sure. Because when you just say you can't, it really begs the question, why not? And it doesn't sound like you're saying you're like disallowed or being censored, and you're not even saying that like the people, your opponents, are being disallowed or censored. I think what you're saying is you can't talk about these things without immediately being just responded to with the opposite propaganda. I think both sides feel that way. I'm more conservative, right? I'm not disinterested in the climate problem, but I'm probably as disenchanted by the response to the conversation as you are, right? Because sometimes you start saying stuff, and all of a sudden people are screaming at you that you don't care about life. You care about,
right.
You care about babies in the womb, but you don't care about the millions that are going to die from climate change. And it's like, hold on.
Sure.
So I would agree that the conversation is hard to have in a cordial way, but yeah, I just wasn't sure if you meant that there was some censorship happening in that direction.
Well, there actually was a little bit. Have you ever seen Planet of the Humans, Michael Moore movie?
No, not yet. I've heard of it.
It's pretty good. I recommend it. They're basically exposing the kind of the lie around the green energy revolution, that it's just not going to be a solution to the environmental problem. But they also mention overpopulation, right? And it's funny because there are plenty of people who like that movie and have referenced that movie as a signpost or a guidepost of like why, the conversation around climate change isn't, we're not having a real conversation around it. But they all of them do not actually ever say anything about overpopulation, which they specifically said in that movie. Overpopulation is a serious issue that we are not allowed to talk about, and we're not allowed to talk. And they tried to censor that movie. They actually took that movie down.
Your belief is that we should limit people's or people should limit their reproductive efforts?
Yes.
So I have a question about that because I would disagree.
Okay.
But if this problem of climate change, and that's not the only problem. There's a lot of problems in our world. Why wouldn't it be beneficial to have more people and have more people actually struggle and work through these issues? A pro-life position, we like to say every time we abort a baby, you might be aborting the next Hitler, but you might be aborting the next Einstein, right? So if we're limiting the number of children we have, are we also limiting the chance of us solving these big problems?
So it's more about an issue of scale, and I'm a father of two, by the way. So,
nice.
I have children. So it's an interesting conversation to me about, I'm not like super hardcore, like, screw humans and we should all die horrible deaths and, for what we've done to the planet. I'm not one of those people. Like, I just think that we can have mature conversations around what we should do about it. Like, I do see there are two issues: consumption and population. So population, doesn't immediately tie to consumption, because there are countries that have lower consumption rates that have very high populations. India is a good example. However, at some point you do, even high population with low consumption does affect your immediate surroundings, the environment, right? Like there's in Kenya, right? The population of, I can't remember the name of the capital city in Kenya, but it's growing so quickly that they've actually destroyed a lot of like their surrounding farmlands, because of just the population is just, spreading out and spreading out and spreading out, and they've caused like some local environmental problems. And you can go back through history, and there have been very local examples of destroying the local climate due to over farming, right? The Fertile Crescent is a really good example of an ancient civilization that basically was destroyed by its own hand in its own over agricultural efforts. That also, you could go to the Dust Bin of the 1920s and 30s, or Dust Bowl, excuse me, right, where we overfarmed, and we did a bad job of farming, and we created like desert conditions. And there were also environmental, changing climate conditions in that too, but it was directly linked to how we treated the land. So, I mean, we can get better at managing what we're doing, but at some point, how what does that even look like? Right? How are people? What are we encouraging people to do? How are we encouraging people to live? And
do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think? Because I think a lot of these problems, and I know this sounds, on one hand, we can encourage, or let me say, discourage people from having children, which I'm against. I would not discourage that, but I know that there are people out there who would discourage it, and some would never do it by force, but some are willing to. China has done it by force, right?
Yes.
But then on the other hand, there's some population issues, and people don't have the resources to feed everybody. And yes, that means people will struggle. Some might die. Wouldn't it be better to have people who are alive, and there's kind of this need to figure out how to get out of the situation that they're in, and maybe they figure it out, maybe not, maybe there's some suffering and dying, which is sad. Isn't that still net better than deciding ahead of time that they should never be born or they should be killed early?
I mean, I don't know. So yeah, but it's a tough conversation, right? Like, it's not and I think, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because, again, it's hard. A lot of people are incensed at this kind of conversation, right? But like,
Fair enough.
Let's take it on a super, like just a household level. Like, if you had a certain income, and let's say you had 3 or 4 kids, and you and your wife, your spouse, decide like, we can't afford another child. Isn't that family planning? Isn't that saying we're not going to, I mean, because I get the whole like, well, we'll just figure it out kind of idea. And in past ancient times, there was a lot of room for that, because you actually had high mortality. People in general just had a high mortality, and children had a high mortality. So you'd have 6 kids and 2 would make it, or 4 would make it. But we don't live in that society anymore. You have 6 kids, pretty much 6 kids are going to make it. And so you have, let's say on a household level, you have strained resources. You wouldn't want to, At 4 kids, you're like, this is it. We really can't afford to have any more kids. We can't afford to send all these kids to college. Like, let's cap it. So that's just a logical, does that make sense to you? Like that, feel like that's just a
Yeah,
logical
I think
thing,
there's it's totally like I'm not gonna tell anybody they can't choose to hold off on having kids or something. I think part of the reason people choose is because of how interconnected everything is. I think the more society and the state is involved with your family, the more they will have a say in whether or not you can have a family, right?
Yeah. And
Subsidized medicine.
I understand the fear of having the state control. I get it. I don't necessarily want the state involved in mandating like who can have a child and how many you can have. That starts to get weird, for sure.
There are some assumptions we made, like, and I'm not accusing you of having made the assumption, but in your example, you said you can't afford to send them to college. We assume that that's like a necessary part of life.
I know, but I'm just saying that's what people think. People think about stuff like that. I'm just, like.
But that's kind of how people do think, though. They go, I can't afford 4 phone bills and sending 4 kids to college. And I think if you actually look at it, you go, well, maybe you don't need 4 phone bills and 4 cars and 4 college kids. Right. It's actually, we live in a weird time where like all of this stuff is kind of how we think. But as you pointed out, hundreds of years ago, people didn't think about sending their kids to college, having 4 cars. They were happy if their kids even made it to age 5 sometimes.
Right. And people were, concerned about like having enough food to eat, or whatever.
Right. So in my mind, it's like we have such an abundance of wealth that we are in a better position than any of our ancestors to say, oh, you know what? I can have more kids. I just might have to cut down on all of these extras. Where people 100 plus years ago, like, they had way more reasons than we did to think that they might not be able to provide for their children, I think. Right. So it's hard for me to ever get on the side of let's make less children. But
well, and I mean, I don't know if you heard the article I was just reading about lowering sperm counts, but it may just be not even in our control anyways. Right? At the end of the day, if we poison the planet enough that people are no longer able to have children, then problem solved, right? Like I'm being a
little facetious.
I am being facetious, but that is. Look, nature has a way of balancing itself, and it happens. It happens, and we are way out of balance. We're way out of balance with nature, and nature is going to say,
and I'd rather people do what people do, which is we do procreate. Every creature procreates, and we're going to have new struggles. We're going to have struggles no matter what we do, and let nature take its course. And if we poison the entire planet, and all of a sudden the birth rate goes down tremendously, well, that's a consequence of our actions. I don't like the other way, right, where we're the ones playing eugenics. I'd prefer God or nature do eugenics, not us.
Well, and it's a very complicated question. It's a very complicated subject. I agree. I don't necessarily want the government involved and deciding who has a kid and who doesn't. But I think as a society, we could probably, right, if we saw ourselves as a human family and we said, hey, we have enough kids in the house already, maybe we could take it down a notch, like, I don't know. I actually don't know what the answer is to that. I'm just saying the problem is there. And we're not having really great conversations around it. And
and to speak to that, that's more of the thing that drew me into calling in, which was at the end of the day, whether you're right or I'm right or both of us are wrong, who knows? Being able to talk about these things and not it feeling like it's leading to a war or censorship or some sort of totalitarian thing is good. I think there's common ground.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me call in.
Yeah, for sure. All right. We got another caller, Joseph. Before I take your call, Joseph, give me 1 second. Hold on. It looks like I'm going to have to skip forward to another article in a second. But Joseph, I'm going to take your call. Just please hang out for 1 second. And checking the coffees, buy me a coffee is a good way to support the show. Buymeacoffee.com/blackbearnews. And also Rockfin tips are super uber cool. I like Rockfin tips. That's a good way to support the show. Or also Patreon at Black Bear News is a good way to support the show. All right, Joseph, how you doing?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My phone was arguing with me about the mic.
That's all good. Yeah, I can hear you very clearly.
I just wanted to get involved in the conversation that you were just having about why overpopulation and why limit your own reproduction. And if you're going to look at it from an Earth standpoint, then all humans in civilization, no matter how poor you are, it's like living with 500 slaves under you your entire life, all in the form of energy consumption to support the roads, the buildings, the heat, everything, your food.
Yeah. Sure.
And so it becomes not just a conscious decision, but actually a moral, ethical, excuse me, a moral, ethical quandary. Because, like, the term Homo sapien means aware of death, aware of one's own limitations, in life, ending. And if we're going to take that as a mantle, as being something different from other beings, then it means you have to consciously be aware of what your effects on all the other beings are. And they all live under the rule of equanimity, like so many square miles to support each one hawk or each one sparrow, right?
Absolutely.
So each one of those square miles has to be supported by so many square miles or cubic meters of reef, so many cubic meters. And every time you add a hawk, you got to double that value for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is so key. And I don't hear that. It's funny and a little bit sad, but when people say there's plenty of space on the planet for humans, right? Like all the humans can fit in the state of Texas, or all the humans can fit, in this area. And I'm like, that's not how it works.
Right. It's the whole world. It's just to do one little thing. And
exactly. Like there, the habitat that each animal lives in is quite complex, right? And it takes this whole forest, right? This whole area of habitat in order to house these particular animals in a way so that they can function within the habitat, right? And man,
absolutely,
we have completely just demolished that whole idea because we go wherever we want, we do whatever we want, we chop down whatever we want. We just, we are a wrecking ball. We are a wrecking ball.
Yes, it's like jigsaw puzzle of complexity layered upon the other, starting with the most what we consider to be simple, like the insects. And yet they're not. They're extremely complex.
Right.
And you just, like the mosquitoes, we attack the mosquitoes, and yet most aquatic life and a lot of the land life comes from feeding on the larva and the mosquito itself of the mosquitoes. They're one of the few creatures that virtually takes nothing from the environment and feeds almost everything above them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, we I guess another we just everything affects everything to such a degree, right? And so we don't necessarily operate in that way. We're very, we are wise and we are clever, but we're, I don't know if we're wise, but we're clever and we're smart and we have big brains, but we also tend to miss the complexity of how everything affects everything.
Do you think
eventually ourselves, right? Like to go back to the dropping sperm counts, like we're just doing things at a very immediate, short
gratifying,
short-term gratification kind of way. And the fallout from that is that we're poisoning not just ourselves, but the environment in which we live and in which everything else lives. And so, we do it without the knowledge of the effects, how everything is very, very intricately linked, And
Absolutely. And it's almost like it's a ratio relationship. Our cleverness counters our wisdom. We get
right,
buried under our own cleverness by layers, and then the wisdom just depletes itself along the way,
right,
or
right.
gets covered over, I guess.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah. Good
I want
thoughts,
to take all your
man.
time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Cool. Some good calls today. But we're almost at the end of the time. I feel like I need to do like 2-hour shows if I'm going to take calls because the calls are good and I want to stay with him. And I have too many things lined up to talk about. That's the other problem. So maybe I need to format. Maybe I need to have just like one subject, and we could talk about it the whole show. We'll just cover like one article the whole show and talk about it. Maybe I'll just do that. It would actually make my life a lot easier because I try to talk about, I don't know, several news items in every show, and I think it gets a little overwhelming. And maybe it's a little, maybe it might be a little confusing to people. There's too much whiplash. Well, lastly, I want to talk about this because this is in the thumbnail today. But from the lever, this is talking about the privatization of Medicare, and I wonder how that's happening under. This is happening under Joe Biden. It's been happening for a long time, so it's not Joe Biden's fault. Medicare being privatized slowly but surely, but he is certainly part of the. He in the past has out in the public, right, with no amount of guilt or shame, has said we've got to cut Medicare and Social Security. Everything's on the table. Like these are I'm paraphrasing what he has actually said several times in his past political career. So if you want to know where his beliefs lie, you can just go back and look at those quotes from Joe Biden. But so Joe Biden has been a firm supporter of cutting. He's a what do you call it? Dino, a Democrat in name only. He's definitely a right-wing Democrat. He's been that way his whole life, right? His whole career. He's a right-wing Democrat, extreme right-wing. He's wanted to cut Social Security, cut Medicare. He helped fund private prisons, or start the whole private prison thing. He's one of the designers of not being able to, discharge your student loan debt. He's one of the people that has made it difficult for people to you can't declare bankruptcy anymore. You're saddled with this debt your entire life. He's created this problem, and no wonder he won't fix it, even though he's trying to tell you he's trying to fix it. It's a shell game. It's 3-card Monte. He's just, this is them saying, we care about you we just couldn't do anything about, these darn court judges and this parliamentarian, and, on and on, right? There's all these reasons why they can't do the things that they told you they were going to do for you. And it's all very convenient. And, and then Republicans take the House, or maybe they win the presidency next time, and then, they can cry and scream about, if you only would vote us back in, we'll do the things for you again. And they just don't do it. But anyways, so a lot of people have predicted that Joe Biden is actually going to ramp up the privatization of Medicare, which is the opposite of what he ran on, right? Didn't he run on trying to give people health care? Where did that go? Where did that conversation go? That conversation is gone. That conversation is out of here. It's not even, nobody's even talking about this anymore. Democrats aren't even pretending to care about this problem anymore. And while you're not looking, while you're not paying attention, while you're worried about your bills and your food bills and your heating bills and maybe you're worried about Ukraine, or maybe you're worried about other things, they're going to actually let that privatization of Medicare encroach just a little bit more. Despite massive and systemic problems with the for-profit Medicare plans, Do I need to go back here? Anyways, denying care. Sorry for the scrolling. Denying care to seniors while costing the government more than $7 billion annually in excess fees. The leading advocacy group tasked with protecting older Americans is welcoming the privatization of the National Health Insurance Program. That's the AARP. These people are supposed to be, out in front for seniors and helping seniors out, and they're supposed to be the voice for the seniors. And what they're doing is just, I don't know, they're leading you down the primrose path, I guess. Anyways, this ARP is welcoming the privatization of National Health Insurance Program while earning as much as $814 million annually from insurers advertising the plans. Whoa. So they're selling out the seniors for advertising money. I have this like gut I've had this kind of gut level distrust of the AARP already, but now I really know why. The state of affairs lays bare a conflict inside AARP, the major advocacy organization for Americans 50 and older, over to how to approach the regulation of Medicare Advantage, the for-profit version of Medicare. On one hand, AARP, formerly known as American Association of Retired Persons, collects enormous amounts of revenue from Medicare Advantage insurers to supplement huge executive salaries. Oh, wow. It sounds like unions that were once supposed to protect the workers now becoming corrupt, levers of the capitalists themselves, the corporations themselves, right? Anyways, so they're taking all this money from Medicare Advantage. On the other hand, the organization is expected to advocate for the best interests of the 38 million members and the 28.4 million Americans now covered by Medicare Advantage plans, or nearly half of all Medicare beneficiaries. The AARP makes money through its own Medicare Advantage plans. Said Don Berwick, an administrator of Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in the Obama administration, who has emerged as a prominent critic of the program. It would be understandable that it would try to protect one of its major income sources. AARP had a chance to call out problems with Medicare Advantage denying care to patients. Arguably the most important. So imagine Medicare Advantage is actually like a supplement to Medicare, and you pay for this supplement. So imagine having Medicare and Medicare Advantage. In fact, my father had both, and you're getting denied services, and that happens too. Arguably the most important issue facing its members enrolled in Medicare Advantage when CMS, the federal agency that oversees Medicare, released a request for comments about the program at the beginning of August, but in its resulting August 30th letter, AARP hardly touched on care denials, instead recommending modest increases in transparency on issues like racial equity and telehealth funding, of course, while championing the expansion of the privatized insurance program. Good God. So they're going to go on to say, throughout the current public health emergency, we have supported the expansion of supplemental benefits in Medicare Advantage to help alleviate the unprecedented healthcare crisis brought about by COVID-19, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, AARP has been reaping the financial benefits of its own Medicare Advantage plan, which it has been offering in partnership with the for-profit insurance giant United Healthcare since 2003. Starting in 2021, AARP also launched a lucrative partnership with major Medicare outsourcing firm Oak Street Health, which is a participant in the ACO Realizing Equity, Access, and Community Health. That sounds, so nice, right? Realizing Equity, Access, and Community Health program that privatizes Medicare benefits for seniors without their consent, as reported by Kaiser Health News in June. Good God. This is frustrating and angering, but they're basically selling you out. The AARP is selling out the seniors that it's supposed to represent And look for more of this to go on. Probably under the Joe Biden administration, he's got a couple more years left to whittle away at these Medicare plans that people have been paid into their whole lives, right? But that's a big push. Even in England, right, where they have a national healthcare system, they're really pushing to privatize healthcare there. They don't want people to have healthcare. And, Joe Biden has never been a supporter of free healthcare for people, even though he told people that when he was running for president. And unfortunately, this kind of thing is going to continue. And the Joe Biden administration will not help you with this. They're not the ones that are going to help you. The Republicans are not going to help you either. So I don't know where people are supposed to go. But this is clearly going in the wrong direction. This is going in the opposite direction. Weren't they supposed to lower the Medicare age too? Wasn't that a plank in the Joe Biden platform too? Like if we're not going to give you free health care, well, at least we'll lower the age of Medicare from, what is it, 65 to they were talking about 60 or 55. Anybody hear about that happening? I don't hear it happening. I've not heard one word about lowering the age of Medicare eligibility. Which if they lowered it to 55, I'm actually eligible right now. Go figure. Anyways, it's a sad story that I wanted to read to you, but this is how the government is going to treat the elderly. They're gonna fleece them for their money and not give them the services that they're paying for or paid into for their entire lives. And on top of that, the Canadian government, they have a national healthcare system. They're offering euthanasia to people who can't afford to live anymore. Elderly people who are afraid of being homeless. They can't afford to live anymore. They're not getting the services that they used to get, or that they've paid into for their whole lives, paid taxes to receive from the government, right? That's the trade-off. You pay the taxes, you're supposed to receive something back for your taxes. And what a kick in the face, right? To pay into something, pay these taxes your entire life, working life, and you get to be a little older, you're disabled, and you're supposed to be getting this return on your investment. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have it anymore. Investment's gone. Sorry about your luck. We can offer you medically assisted suicide, though. We can do that for you if things get a little rough. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's so angering that I'm going to start cursing, which I'm not going to do. So what I think I'm going to do is end the show here. But thank you all for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Thanks to the callers. I will be back tomorrow at the regular time of 12 p.m. Pacific. And until next time, peace.